All right. Let's flip the script on this one. What do you say? As we went through this book process, I asked you probably more questions about writing because I was intrigued by it. I'm like, it's really cool. Like we're sitting here writing a book. Well, we're doing it together, but I mean, in all honesty, he's doing most of the writing. You're taking the story I'm telling and you're putting it on a piece of paper.
Right.
So, and that blows my mind because I know what I tell you. I know my story. I know my history. I know my experiences. And when you put it on paper, it's just like it comes to life. It's really cool. Like, I mean, it's really cool. Like he has a gift. He has a freaking gift for sure.
You know what? I think if I do have a gift, it's being able to capture the voice of the person whose story it is. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, I think when you read this, it's not like I wrote it. It's your mind, right? These are your thoughts.
My personality, my
comes
demeanor.
Out of it.
It's definitely
it's the way you would say things.
Absolutely. Now, do you think that a lot of that is because like we met in person and you got to?
Yeah, I think it'd be really tough to do that for somebody I didn't know pretty well.
Gotcha. Okay.
Well, and I've never worked with somebody I didn't know, so I don't know what that would be like.
Right. Probably not as smooth, I'm assuming.
Right.
So. Well, I prepared some questions for you because I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that like want to write. As you heard from the Pennies podcast, my wife loves to journal.
Right.
She likes to write too. So I was like, hey, write a book. All right. So, okay. So I got a few questions for you because I guess what it is like, this isn't really where you started or like where you had envisioned, right?
No.
So what made you start writing? Like, going down this journey of writing articles and books and stuff like that?
Yeah, so I was always a big reader. I was the kid, in the car with the book light, with the battery, coming back from going to see my grandparents or something. And I'm reading a book.
Would it be safe to say you were the dork? Or the smart guy that I'm learning now? You're the smart guy. You ain't the dork. You're a dork then, but now you're like the smart guy.
Now mailbox money comes in, I'm not a dork. But no, what's funny is I was not a good student. Like I was not a nerdy kid in school. I was kind of like
Don't be jumping questions on me.
Okay.
Go ahead.
But I did love to read. Mm-hmm. So within the confines of my family, I was a dork, right? And I think you can't be a big reader and not wonder, what would it be like to create something like this?
Right.
And I was also a big consumer of gun magazines and outdoor magazines and hunting magazines. And that's where it really started. I started reading some of those, and there were some authors that I loved who were awesome. Mm-hmm. And to this day, I love to read their stuff. And what's cool is I've become friends with a lot of those guys, which is really neat. But then I would read something and go, this kind of sucks. I think I could do better than this.
Right.
And at the time, I was working as a lobbyist at NRA in Virginia. And
that's about the time we met, correct? When that was happening?
No, this would have been before that.
Okay.
And my buddy Jeff Johnston, who's now at Field Ethos, was one of the editors of American Hunter magazine, which is a huge magazine with probably over 1 million in circulation every month. So big deal. And I started telling him like, hey, I'd like to kind of do this. I think some of the stuff I read isn't that great. I feel like I could at least do that good. And he really encouraged me. And he said, write me something. And I wrote a story about a hunt I had been on a couple years ago, then a couple years before. He looked at it and he said, do you want me to tell you it's good or do you want me to be honest? And I was like, well, be honest. Like, you tell me it's great. If it's not, it does me no favors. And he demolished it. He's like, look, this is grammatically correct, well-written, technically correct, and boring as hell. And
it was like lack of emotion, lack of feeling.
Yeah, it was just, I just didn't know how to tell a story yet. I mean, people think that, you're a writer, you're not a writer. I started playing guitar a couple years ago, right? I do not have natural talent for playing guitar, but I like it. Mm-hmm. But even the folks that do have natural talent, you got to put the time in.
Of course.
It's like anything else.
Hard work beats talent.
Absolutely.
For sure.
And if you can combine both, that's where great things happen, right? But Eddie Van Halen didn't sit down one day and become the guitar player he was. He worked at it and worked at it and worked at it. That's that, Gladwell's 10,000 hours thing. And so we went through that exercise a few times, and then Jeff was like, you're ready, but I can't publish you because if I do, everybody's going to think it's just because we're friends. So I had to go out and find somebody else, another outlet, and I did. And then I learned, and I had some good mentors like Jeff and others who taught me, if you make the editor's job easy, so they don't have to do a bunch of editing, they don't have to fix grammatical mistakes, and you have good photos, which at the time I had zero photo skills. So I had to learn how to take a picture, which that's what I still struggle with. But he's like, if you do those things, you'll get all the work you want. In other words, you'll get as much writing work as you want to get. And I found that to be the case. I mean, if you deliver on the other thing is meet your deadlines, right? People have this thing for whatever reason, they think because they're creative or whatever, rules don't apply to them. And I come from the business world. Like, you don't, sorry boss, I wasn't inspired today to get this done. No, you get your shit done.
Right, exactly.
So let's say I'm never late. It's extremely rare that I miss a deadline. My stuff comes in clean, and the more I did it, the more efficient that is. The better I got at it, the faster I can be. And I had done a dozen years of that on almost a daily basis. Little snippets here and there. I'd fit in 30 minutes before work or something of writing before I ever even started a book. So I think those where I got my reps in.
Gotcha. So like training.
Like anything else.
Yeah.
Like anything.
Just like anything else. I love it. Okay. When did you realize that this was a passion? Was there like a defining moment? Like, okay, so take us there.
Okay. So the first book that I worked on was called The Terminalist, and Jack Carr is the author. And I was kind of the behind the scenes guy. And the writing was a team effort, but this particular scene, it was the very first thing that got written in the book. And it's the very first part of the book. I was actually on a flight to Nashville, and we had talked about it. I think by that point, we'd actually sat down and kind of plotted out the whole book, but we hadn't started anything. And I was on a flight, and I got inspired. And I pulled out my phone, and I started, in the little notes app, started writing what became the prologue of that book. Got to my hotel, the Sheraton, downtown Nashville, rushed to my room. I was like, had this drive like I hadn't had for anything in a long time.
Passion, baby.
Yeah. I had my work laptop, turned everything off, emailed myself the note, and sat down and did the first draft of that. Got changed, edited, everything else added to. But that first draft, I got done, shut the computer, and I had this overwhelming sense of satisfaction. Like I'm not a guy who's sits around feeling great all the time about stuff. I'm a happy guy, but I'm not like, I'm always, I always want to do something more. I feel like I need to be doing something. And I had this feeling of like completion. And I was like, holy crap, this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah, like, this so like I found my calling.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Like in that moment, I was like, okay, wow. All right, I can do this. Because
people go their whole lives and they never find what you just described.
And a lot of times because they're scared.
So. It is because they're scared.
And I think, it's out there a lot of places, but The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield, which I've had you read, was for me the thing that said, it takes all your excuses away.
Right.
And he talks about resistance, and resistance is
The Resistance.
Yeah, self-doubt.
It's a great book if you haven't read it yet.
Yeah, anything that keeps you in your mind from doing something that you think you would love, he calls it resistance. And it's just great. And I've gone back and read that book a dozen times. And I can't say this definitively, but I think I've read it straight through before I've ever started a book.
I remember when you recommended it to me, you're like, it's a quick read.
Yeah.
And you were right.
Yeah,
it's like, awesome. Because it's about your creativity. I was like, okay, Keith, I really don't want to do this. But I was like, wow, okay.
It's not just about writing. It's not about whatever.
Writing. It's about whatever you're passionate about or finding it or whatever. So it's a great read. Which, by the way, Stephen Pressfield's the dude that did Gates of Fire.
Right.
So
awesome.
Yeah. So he's a good author.
Yeah. And he was a Marine.
Yeah. He's got a lot of credentials for sure.
Yeah.
All right. So you found your passion, man. That's like good stuff. Like it really is. I want to sit down and I want to write a book. What's the process for starting a book project? Like what's Keith's process? I'm sure every author has their own thing. What's yours?
Biggest thing is you have to start.
There you go.
Right.
You have to start. You have to take that first step, right?
Take the first step.
I feel like
write the first word, and For me, I'm not an outline guy per se. This story we outline because I'm not creating the story. The story already happened. I'm just telling it, right? And I don't want to miss anything. But let's say we're going to start from scratch and write a novel. I just start writing, and it's just kind of like see what comes out. And there's a really cool thing when you turn everything off and lock the door and start writing, whether it's your subconscious mind or God or something. It's this creative, people say get the creative juices flowing. It's a real thing. And it's sometimes like inspiration just hits, and then you'll write something and you're like, where the hell did that come from?
Right.
So for me, the process is to sit down and do it. And Stephen Hunter, who's one of my all-time favorite authors, wrote Point of Impact, which became the movie Shooter, and a whole series of books, and then some standalone books. Just great guy.
I believe he read UNAFRAID, didn't he?
He called it superb, as a matter of fact.
So that's good.
So we got that going for us.
So Shooter with Mark Wahlberg, that book.
Right.
He read ours and he liked it. So that's a big deal.
And when he wrote a blurb for the first book I worked on, and I don't fanboy out on people, but it was like, I got to reach out and just thank this guy. And I emailed him. And his response, I have it printed out, and it's like in the little thing on my desk that holds files and stuff.
Right.
And it's something along the lines of, I know people who have talked about doing it, planned to do it, built rooms for doing it, but they never did it. You did it. You should be happy and proud. And it was the coolest thing ever, right? And it's the thing, you just have to start. You could plan a book for the rest of your life and never start writing. And you can get bitten by that. Like, I've had this book idea in my head for a few years, and it's historical fiction, and I haven't had the time to really do the research, because you can't just make up history. You have to know what was going on. And if I wrote it right now, people would think it was a blatant ripoff of 1883. Because so many of the elements of the story it's not the same story, but there's a lot of parallels.
That time frame.
Yeah. And I remember I'm watching, I'm like, well, there goes that book.
There goes that idea.
Book now. Yeah. So you just have to do it, and you have to start. So if you're an outline person, write an outline. If you're like me and you just kind of spit it out, and you might write for 3 hours and it's garbage, and that's fine. Tomorrow start again. And just keep doing it until that magic thing happens. I honestly, I'm fascinated by musicians and songwriting. And I'm not a songwriter and I'm not a musician. But to hear interviews of, Paul McCartney or whoever talk about their inspiration for a song and how it happened. And there's a lot of parallels.
Right. That's kind of the same thing.
Yeah. And especially in a collaborative environment.
Right.
You're sitting there and you're bouncing ideas off each other, and you're, I got this. And then you run with something. It's really cool.
Yeah. It sounds like it, dude. It's like, I know I've been impressed with your methodology of it all. I mean, it's probably not your standard, but you do, but
I'm by nature a procrastinator, and I'm totally not organized. That's like, if I have weakness, it drives my wife crazy. Papers everywhere, no organization whatsoever. But this is the one thing I know, if I'm going to do it, it's got to have some structure. And so I kind of force myself into, it's the one area of my life that I'm highly disciplined and don't procrastinate.
No, you can tell. You can definitely tell. All right. You kind of touched on this a little bit, but maybe take us a little deeper. Or have you ever started a project and thought, like, you're halfway through it and like, man, this is just horrible? I think you kind of just said it, like, even if you write for 3 hours, start it over. Have you ever done a big project or something you're like, this is going to be awesome, and then you kind of go back and read it and you're like, okay, this just sucked?
Definitely when I got started out doing magazine stuff.
By your measure.
Yeah,
like,
well, I'm very hard on I still think everything I write sucks, right? And when somebody likes it, I'm shocked, right? Because I'm not, I don't know, I think at a certain point when you think everything you do is great, you're probably not that cool of a person to be around.
Right.
So I haven't had a lot of that, but there's definitely times, if I go back and read something that I wrote 15 years ago, I'd probably cringe. Then I'm like, geez, that was
Gotcha.
terrible.
Oh, I'm sure.
You know?
Yeah, 15 years is a long time.
There's even times where I write something and I think I'm doing great, and I look at it when let's say it's a web article for, whoever, and it posts, and I go and I read it, and I realize I used the same word 3 times in the same paragraph. And not but like some specific word. I'm like, oh, geez. So it's never like, it's like anything else, golf, musical instrument, shooting. You can never totally master it. You just try to get a little better every time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Little increments, man.
Yep.
All right. This is probably the biggest question. All right. What would Keith say to aspiring writers? There's one piece of advice that you could give that you've found to be your saving grace, or I always got to do this, or have this with me, or whatever. What would it be?
Right.
Right?
Writer's right.
Just
There's
right.
no magic. You're not going to.
Just right.
Just do it. I mean,
Just
it's
right.
like if you're going to write a book, you have to write a book.
True.
Right?
Very true.
Or you have to hire somebody to write it for you. But if you want to be a writer, you gotta write. And you can't write every 6 months. It's an everyday thing. Consistency.
Yeah. It's like a diet or exercise program.
Absolutely.
Or being there for your family.
And it's less overwhelming that way also. If you just say, okay, I'm going to write for a half hour, or I'm going to write for an hour, or whatever. And sometimes that you get on a roll and that might turn into 3 or 4.
Right.
But if you just take small bites, I'm going to write this whole huge book. No, I'm going to write a chapter.
How to eat an elephant.
Exactly. One bite at a time.
One bite at a time, baby.
Yeah. And that's how we did this. We would talk about a chapter, whether it was here in person or on the phone, record it. I'd think about it, sit down and write that one chapter, usually all at once, send it to you. You'd give me feedback like, oh, no, this didn't happen that way. Or, oh, I forgot about this, or whatever. And then we'd tune it up and kind of go back and forth. I think to me, the one bite at a time, one chapter at a time is what works for me. Everybody's going to be a little bit different, but there's no writer can get around the fact that you have to write,
right? Of course,
on a very regular basis,
Absolutely.
Right? 5 days a week. It's a job like anything else. So that's my biggest piece of advice. I highly recommend Stephen Pressfield's book, and he has a whole series of books on writing. That one's by far the best.
What was that title again?
The War of Art.
The War of Art. So not Art of War by Sun Tzu.
Right, it's a play on those words.
Yeah, it's a play on those words.
And what the backstory is, he got, he's a writer. He's a published guy. So he gets asked by every Tom, Dick, and Harry who wants to be a writer, or their son wants to be a writer, or whatever. Oh, do you have any advice? So he wrote an essay. And when you asked him that question, he would just say, here, read this. Well, that essay, somebody said to him, as if I remember correctly, like, you should publish this. And it's by far his best-selling book.
Crazy, right?
Yeah.
Gates of Fire versus How to Write. Or you unlock the creativity of your brain.
Absolutely.
It's crazy.
So those are 2 big ones. Do it. And he's going to say the same thing. Like, you have to do it.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be this, like, thing where you sit down and it's this giant flowery perfection or whatever. You're going to just knock it out, and then you can tune it up. I mean, we're not on typewriters anymore.
Right.
You can go back in Word and fix things and edit and clean them up. I don't think anybody writes anything perfect the first time. And the tough part for a lot of people is to show it to somebody.
Right.
I think there are probably some brilliant books out there sitting on people's
collecting dust,
hard drives, or in their drawer, and they're scared.
Yeah.
And it is tough. I mean, it's kind of like, here are my guts.
Right?
It would crush you if somebody's like, oh, this sucks. But you got to do it. You got. I mean, if you're not going to do that, just write for yourself, and that's fine. If that's your thing, if somebody's writing a journal or whatever.
Right.
But if you want to write for consumption by others, you have to show it to other people, and start with some trusted people to give you good feedback, though, because
honest, good feedback.
Somebody telling you that it's great when it's not is not helping you at all.
Sort of like your first guy.
Absolutely.
Like, he told you not what you wanted to hear, but what you wanted to hear, the truth.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So being brutally honest.
Yeah, like probably your mom shouldn't be the first person you show it to.
Oh, I love it, honey.
This is so great. You're so brilliant.
A good kid.
Yeah. So, but I'll have my wife read stuff. I'll have friends. I've got a couple selected friends that I really trust their opinion, and I'll send things to them.
Nice. All right. Here's an impromptu question.
Okay.
What's your next project?
Well, I've got our next project.
Yeah, you do.
And then I'm right now working on a book with Jeff Struker, who's one of the Ranger Regiment kind of heroes of Black Hawk Down. And then became a chaplain, and has had
Incredible
this
story.
Incredible guy.
Incredible guy.
Really, you know, when he called and basically said, "Do you want to write a book with me?" I was like, "You want me to write a book with you?" You know,
heck yeah.
I knew who you were when I was in high school.
Right.
So that's really cool, and it's a different genre altogether. Even though it's his military background, it's really a business book. So that's cool to do something different. And yeah, all the stuff we're going to do. And then I started a novel also in a hotel in Nashville. Something I seriously think.
That's your place.
Well, I think that is a place where creativity happens. But look how much music has been written in Nashville.
Right.
And my family's from that area, like way back. So maybe there's something there. But I sat down one night in a hotel room and started a book. There again, had no plan for it, just started spitting it out. And it's about a third of the way done. And I've just had other projects, so I've had to put it on hold. And everybody that's read it is like, when are you going to finish that book? It's so awesome. And I'm guilty of not taking my own advice there. Like, I just need to do it.
Right.
But, you know, I've got guys like you that we got projects right in front of us. I know I'm going to take 6 months off and write this novel that.
I'm sure there's a way to juggle it all.
Yeah, you can do it all. Well, you can't do it all, but you can do a lot. I don't do any social media, so I don't spend any time. I don't waste. If I'm going to do something, it's either going to be fun, it's going to be for my family, or it's going to make me money. And for me, social media crosses none of those.
I would agree with that.
So
I'll do the marketing piece.
Yeah, that's the great part of this, right? Like, you're out there, you're connecting with people, and that's great. And if I was spending all day doing that, I would never get anything written, and we'd have nothing to push out.
There's definitely priorities and the tasks.
So I just minimize.
So it's good to have a team.
Absolutely. Everybody has their own strengths.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's great when they complement one another.
Good.
Go right.
I'll tell you this right now, like we talked about this. I think that this is very important. I think there's a lot of people out there that want to be writers or start putting things, the pen to paper, and really and I think you kind of said they're scared to do it. So this guy knows what he's doing, and you could see just by his writings, his books that are out there, and, you know, obviously UNAFRAID that's coming out. So great podcast, man.
Awesome.
I gained a lot of it. Like, I know I ask you questions all the time, but that was awesome. So
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, all right, guys, take it easy. See ya.